The hollow fractographic life and dimensionality. When we talk about other dimensions, what do we actually mean? Most people are taught to think of the universe as a purely physical place alone, nothing else, that's made up of just matter moving through three-dimensional space. But when we begin to view our Earth as Mother Gaia, like the ancients, a living organismic vortex entity of her own with her own intelligence, when we begin looking deeper into life from the perspective of toroidal cosmology, collective consciousness, and the possibility of a holographic cosmos, we enter a very different way of thinking about reality altogether. In this view, reality is not just simply material, but toroidally spiritual, that we live in like a Möbius strip or a Klein bottle conception on a dielectric inertial plane of a vortex torus field. The Earth is basically an organism, and matter may be only just one layer of a much larger structure. And beyond what we perceive through our senses may exist additional levels of reality that are not somewhere far away at vast distances, but are instead interwoven within the very fabric of the world around us. Think of a hologram, okay? One of the fascinating properties of a hologram is that every small piece of that hologram contains information about the entire larger image of it. If you break the hologram down into smaller pieces, each fragment still contains the whole pattern encoded within that small piece. The image becomes less detailed, but the information still remains present throughout the entire field. The cosmos operates in a very similar way. Rather than being a collection of separate objects that are distant, faraway places, reality is a vast, interconnected, interwoven holographic field in which every part contains information about the whole thing. And so if that is true, then what we call dimensions are not distant locations somewhere beyond the stars, and we don't live in a heliocentric solar system. But dimensions are layers of fabricate reality folded with one another topologically, existing simultaneously and occupying the same space while operating according to different states or different conditions. And this is where the idea becomes difficult for the ordinary mind to comprehend, because we naturally think in terms of distance and separation. We imagine traveling from one place to another. Yet, geocentric theories suggest that movement between dimensions is less like crossing a great distance, and it's more like changing your perspective within the same underlying field. A useful analogy here would be a sheet of paper, right? If you had a sheet of paper, if 2 points are separated by a long distance on the surface, it appears that you must travel across the entire sheet to get from one point to another. But if the paper is folded, these two distant points suddenly touch, and what seemed far apart becomes immediately adjacent through a change in geometry. Many physicists use similar examples when discussing space-time. Reality may possess structures and relationships that are not obvious from our everyday perspective. There's even a professor in the Department of Physics and Astronomy at the Johns Hopkins University who published an article that's called The Mental Universe, and he states that the universe is immaterial, mental and spiritual, live and enjoy. That's a very, very important quote that just flies over the heads of most people. Time itself may be more complex than we actually imagine. Currently, we all are programmed to experience time in a linear fashion, in a linear straight line, moving from past to future in an evolving progression. And largely it's because that our lives are organized around repeating cycles, the rhythms of the sun, the moon, and the seasons and celestial motions. But yet when we look at these deeper cycles of the celestial bodies geocentrically, such as the precession of the equinoxes and other reoccurring cosmic patterns, time begins to appear less like a straight line and it becomes more asymptotic, like a repeating toroidal spiral or vortex. In this sense, time may possess both cyclical and progressive characteristics simultaneously, like a toroidal flow, a Möbius strip, or a Klein bottle. It may curve back into itself while still moving forward. The precession of the equinox proves that we move forward in time while still simultaneously moving backward during precession. And the past influences the future, and the future still shapes the present, and everything exists within a greater cycle of reoccurrence and transformation. And from this perspective, some phenomena that people call extraterrestrial may actually better be described as hyperdimensional or interdimensional. This is where metaphysics and physics begin to overlap. The material world and the world of consciousness may not be separate domains at all, but different aspects of one underlying reality, a living, interconnected, holographic, universal cosmos in which everything is ultimately connected to everything else. In the book, The Holographic Universe, it says that, quote, our world and everything in it are also only ghostly images, projections from a level of reality so beyond our own, it is literally beyond both space and time. That is almost exactly the language of manifestation emerging from an unseen source or unseen realm. It says the universe itself is a kind of giant hologram, a splendidly detailed illusion. Now, the black sun could be discussed as the hidden projector, while the visible universe becomes the projected image. It's also stating the very fabric of reality itself possesses what appears to be an undeniable holographic property. This supports the idea that manifestation is not fundamental, but emerges from a deeper informational order. It also says that, quote, the shifting of a person's consciousness from one level of the hologram of reality to another. This is very, very important because it also includes consciousness as a part of this mystery. Now, in the other book, Stalking the Wild Pendulum on the Mechanics of Consciousness, it says that most of us see the universe through a tiny window, which allows us to see just a single color or reality out of the endless spectrum of realities. When taken together, all these realities form a large hologram of interacting fields. This is very close to the idea of a toroidal field or a dielectric field giving rise to visible manifestations in the physical realm that we live in. Also says, quote, we are holding in our hands a record of the interface pattern of waves, or we may even call it a hologram. Okay? So it's talking about an invisible source. This is very, very powerful because it's talking about our reality is emerging as wave interactions rather than solid objects coming from an unseen source. It also says that these altered states allow us to function in realities that are normally not available to us. And the astral, talking about the astral realm, is a vast reality that serves as a bridge connecting all physical realities. So that is also talking about psychedelic experiences and higher states of consciousness or altered states of consciousness. Now, whether someone agrees with that or not, it still supports the idea that the visible world is not the only level of existence, and consciousness plays a role in it and the different levels of consciousness that we can obtain. It also says that our physical science does not deal with reality, whatever that may be, whatever that is, it says, but rather it has merely generated a set of consistency relationships to explain our common ground of experience. Now, that is just an extraordinary statement because it openly suggests that what we call the physical world may actually just be a representation rather than the ultimate reality. And what we proclaim as science or scientific advancement is still just a basic intellectual tool that only scratches the surface of being able to articulate and describe or capture the inherent infinite mystery of what we call life or reality, and that there's way more deeper levels to this. Everything is connected through deeper levels. It also says in the book that everything seems to interact with everything else at many subtle levels of the universe beyond the purely physical level. And this aligns closely with the holographic and field based interpretations of reality. It says also, the universe wants to make itself known to those who can comprehend its language. And consciousness has reached a point in frequency high enough on the scale of the quality of consciousness to resonate with the highest levels of creation. And we are all just living inside